After many years ago having read this book, I am rereading again from this book called Get Us Out of Here. This is an interview of Maria Simma by Nikki Eltz, who received Poor Souls in Purgatory for several decades. Today, I am reading about protection and guidance. This is what the Poor Souls said about that. Nikki asks, Maria, do the poor souls ever give any guidance, instructions, or advice to their living family members? Oh, yes, that happens. It happened a lot through me in 1954 when souls would come giving their date of death and the town. They would ask me to tell the family to correct something. Often it was an inheritance that was unfairly distributed or against the wishes of the deceased. In another case that comes to mind right now, a soul told me to tell his son, a priest who lives just across the valley down there, to put back his communion rail. So first I took the instruction to an acquaintance of his, but he said, oh, you tell him yourself. He'll believe you more than he'll believe me. So I did that and wrote to him. But until today, the man has not followed the advice. I believe the priest is a good man, but he's simply afraid to act upon it. Will they also guide us in the same manner if we step in and pray and do good deeds for them? Yes, just trust and make the first move to help them. Is it true, Maria, that we take everything that we learn here on earth with us? Yes, it is. If that's the case, is there any evidence that poor souls help us with what they have learned while here? So if a seamstress needs help with her work, would it do her more good were she to specifically ask seamstresses in purgatory to help her? Yes, there is evidence for that. Were we to be assisted quickly during a potential car accident, the chances are very good that the helper knew something about cars rather than about knitting. I know a man who often had to smuggle things across the borders here during the war. He always asked customs officers in purgatory to help get across without getting caught. He wasn't even caught once in many years of doing it. But what he was smuggling was for God's people in the form of Bibles and other religious articles. A drug, money, or weapons smuggler should not try to get the poor souls help for his work. They never help us with bad endeavors. How else could the poor souls guide us? We can ask a poor soul to guide us spiritually, and this would be especially helpful if time comes when we do not have access to a good priest and feel lonely in that regard. They will help us with this. In the cases, however, that I knew of where this was happening, I never really heard how it was happening, but the poor souls have said that it does. Can the poor souls act protectively for us in ways that actually slow down the free will? Yeah, yes, in a way, but only positively so. They could step in and block us from grabbing for the bottle, from driving too fast, or anything else that could endanger us. See, they certainly could help smokers quit far more easily than were they to try to do so without their assistance. Perhaps this is a good moment for me to say a bit about the idea of free will. When they help block a negative habit, our will becomes freer and not more limited. We are never acting freely when we are so weak as to sin or to bow to a dependency. In choosing something that binds or controls us, we have to at first twist and polish it so that we can lie to ourselves, saying that it is, after all right and good. This distortion makes us not free. Only in heaven will we be free to concentrate purely on the absolute good, our God. Can you give me an example of how a poor soul freed or protected someone? Yes, but it was another form of it. A young man was looking for a good and holy wife. He had a woman in mind and visited her on occasion. Yet every time that he went to her house, there was a man off to the side somewhere who called over to him, "Don't go there. You will not be happy with her." The first few times he ignored it and went on. But then the third or fourth time he stopped and took a closer look at this man. It was his own father who had died many years before. He then certainly paid attention and went hunting elsewhere. So here he was freed and protected from future troubles. Then, yes, another case. I knew a young woman who tried repeatedly to enter a convent, but for different reasons, she was always refused. Then she got into the habit of sitting in a pretty spot by the lake in order to find her peace with God. One day she was heading that way and suddenly heard a voice very close by saying, "Stop, come back." She ignored it and continued. Again, the voice said, "Come back." Still, she continued until suddenly she felt two hands push her back. To this, she then responded and did not go any further. Later on, she told a believing psychologist about what had happened, and he said to her, "I understand it completely because in the state you were in, you would have easily been mesmerized by the water and could have easily fallen or jumped in without even knowing it and possibly drowned." And here's a fun story about protection and property again. A fellow near here by the name of Hans was awakened one night by a voice telling him to go out into the barn. He turned over and ignored it. Again, "Go out to the barn." The third time, perhaps he finally did so. He went out and looked around. Everything was fine, and he thought, "Strange. What should I do? I'll just sit down and wait a bit." Within a few moments, the door opened and a stranger walked in. Hans stayed silent and hidden. The stranger walked straight over to the pigsty, climbed in, and picked up two of Hans' young piglets. Now he understood very well. Do you see, it had been his father's voice. Hans jumped up, chased the man, and in doing so caught the thief to drop the piglets as he dashed out the door. Another case where the poor souls protected the property and thus freed him from a loss. They know our world and our situation in it exactly. And so our requests of them should be as broad as our lives are. Maria, you say that they always protect us somewhat, but do they protect us more when we pray for them often? Oh, yes, much more. One could say that they then get our address. When we start praying for them, the news must go around very quickly. They need our attention so very badly so that they will do a lot in order for us to realize that it is they who are calling. When I ask them for specific help for something, I say, "Help me with this or that, and I will give you an extra mass next week. And if you don't, I won't." You might think that this is making deals with God or challenging him, but I don't think it is, for the simple reason that time or space does not bind prayer. If the intention to do so is honest, then their activity and the timing of it cannot be measured from our point of view in this element of time. Try it. You'll notice that they become very active. Nikki then asks, "Can they return lost things to us?" Well, that too. And I have a great example of this. 2 years ago, a sister went on a speaking tour in France with Vika, one of the Medjugorje visionaries. Of course, the trip was fast and hectic, and as they went, the sister found herself carrying a flight bag with a lot of money in it. This money had been collected to pay for the rent of the rooms where Vika was scheduled to speak. They often shared the same bedroom, and early one morning, just minutes before they had to dash off to their next meeting, the bag was not to be found. Sister knew precisely where it had been the day before, but of course could not delay their departure because many thousands of people were waiting to see and hear Vika. And so off they went without it. Before leaving, though, she asked the landlady to turn the room upside down and then, if need be, the entire house, because it was a lot of money and it was already owed elsewhere. The trip continued and the bag was nowhere in the house. Vika then continued on her way to Germany, and the sister traveled back to Medjugorje, still very desperate about the loss. Understandably, she felt very responsible. Upon arriving in Medjugorje, she called up to the poor souls, "Find that bag for us, and I will give you a novena of masses." Only 3 days later, a letter arrived in Medjugorje, and it was from the landlady of the house in France where they had slept that night. It said, "Just now we found the bag, and all the funds are in it with nothing missing. It was at the very spot you told us that you had seen it the day before you left." This does not surprise me in the slightest. A novena of masses certainly takes many souls up into heaven. I found out about this only when Sister visited me and left the question for me to ask a poor soul. Did a poor soul return the lost bag of money during the Vica trip to France? A month later or so, I was given the answer, yes. Nikki then asks, now, is it possible that the bag one evening, so to say, floated on its own back to the very spot? With God, everything is possible, but I would think that the poor soul chattered into the subconscious of the thief to return the bag, and it was this pressure on his conscience, which is formed within our subconscious mind, that the good thief found intolerable. But did he re-enter the house secretly to return it exactly to where he had found it? That's quite mysterious, I must admit. Or did he have free access to the house anyway? No matter what, the poor souls received 9 masses from the sister, and they will never neglect to pray and to act for her. Maria, do you know of a similar case of protection that would be meaningful to a great number of people? Yes. This should be very meaningful to the entire world. The poor souls told me that they had helped extinguish the fire at the Chernobyl nuclear power station, and more recently, I also found out that they helped shorten the Gulf War. These things they did because so many people were praying. There is nothing where they cannot step in for us. They saved a good part of the next village uphill from here in 1954, which was a terrible year up here for avalanches. Across this valley, we had more than 75 people lose their lives because of the huge amounts of snow. Blondes was nearly entirely destroyed, but up there in the village of Fontanella, the souls stepped in because there had been a bedridden woman who for 30 years offered all her prayers and sufferings for the good of that parish. So one can say it was she who really saved all those houses and certainly many lives. When the snow experts looked at it the next morning, all they noticed was that something very powerful, of course more powerful than even the avalanche itself, had stopped it in its tracks. That's what they can do. So not asking them every day for the protection is at a great loss. Please never forget them. Maria, if we can ask them to protect us here, can we ask the souls in the highest of the 3 levels to go down to the lowest level to protect the souls down there? No, not that. The reason for this is that they only know and act for what is ahead of them. They seek and yearn for the light of God and aim only in his direction. We must ask Saint Michael and the other angels to protect and help those in the bottom levels. How else can they help us? I believe it is only limited by our imagination as long as our imagination stays holy and good. They will never help us to accomplish something that is contrary to God's wish. And please do not lose hope if, on occasion, the help is not clearly evident. Do not forget that for everything they do, they need to get permission from Jesus through his Blessed Mother. And as we all know, Jesus' plan for us is not always in line with our wishes, even if they are good ones. Also, their work often remains unnoticed because the peace resulting from their protection is so often silent and invisible. For instance, you're walking across an intersection with a green light. As you do so, a car is heading for the same intersection, but what you do not know is that the driver has dozed off. A poor soul can quickly awaken him, and thus the car stops without your ever noticing anything. Your life was saved, and still you never knew a thing about it. So often they work for us and we don't notice anything. Maria, can you tell me another story that concerns, say, general assistance rather than spiritual or bodily protection? Well, yes, this following happened in France. A woman had made the promise to make a mass offering for the poor souls every month. She was a modest and pious woman whose work it was to be a domestic in large houses. Then it happened that she lost her job and was out of work for longer than she expected. Her money was almost gone, but one day leaving Mass, she realized that she had not yet made her offering for the Mass that month. But now she had a true problem. Was she to make that month's offering for the Mass, she would be completely penniless in just a few short days. And so she hesitated. But she quickly trusted in Jesus and knew that he would not abandon her in a pinch. She went to the priest and, as usual, went ahead and made the offering for one Mass for the souls in purgatory. Then she headed home. As she left the church, a well-dressed, good-looking man of stature walked up to her and said that he had heard that she was in need of a new job. She acknowledged this, but still wondered how he could have possibly known. He was gentle but convincing and told her to take a particular road and to knock on the third house on the right. And off she went, still a little bit puzzled. She found the house quickly and liked what she saw immediately. She went up to the door and knocked on it. A very friendly old woman came to the door and let her in with joy when she heard of this woman's need for work and that her experience was that of a domestic. It did not take long for them to agree on the work that was necessary, and both were so happy and relieved to have found what they each had needed quite badly. As the newcomer walked around the large and quite elegant living room, she noticed a framed photograph on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. It was the man who just minutes before had addressed her outside her church. "Madame," she asked, "who is the gentleman in this photograph?" "Oh," said the old woman, "that's my son, Henry. He died 4 years ago." If we know of someone, for example, who as a child suffered much at the hands of its parents or society, can a poor soul protect that person from Satan's constant attacks through these wounds that are, of course, still open until, say, that person can acknowledge and address the wounds by going to an appropriate priest or doctor? Oh, most definitely. And the poor soul can also guide the person to the appropriate man. I know cases where precisely that happened, and only later did the poor souls tell me that it had been they who had stepped in and helped. Maria, what happens if someone asks them to help with something that is not entirely holy? You said earlier that they do not help in those cases. Oh, no, no. If someone asks for their help with bad intentions, it is never they who help, if any help comes at all. Only Satan will help someone with bad intentions, but he can, of course, also fake their activities. One last question, Maria. Do you know of a case where they appeared to someone who then asked them to help him with something improper? Well, yes. During a bad car accident once, 3 souls appeared to the driver saying to him, "And now you will help us." They had clearly held him in place because the car had flipped end over end at least once, and he walked away from it without a scratch. When it became clear to him that they had protected him from certain death, he wanted more help from them with the insurance papers. Now, he did attend masses for them, but thought that they would also help with this. After quite a while, it became very clear to him that they were not helping with this because the man did not get a penny for the wrecked car. He was angry with this and seemed not to understand why they hadn't helped there as well. But what had happened was that he had not told the entire truth to the insurance company, claiming some falsehoods about the accident. That dishonesty earned him nothing but more troubles. Pretty interesting stuff, isn't it? I think about this a lot more. Today, I just came back from a funeral of a dear friend, and I thought the entire time about purgatory, whereas others may have thought he was already in heaven or made other such assumptions. I got a chance to talk with his family and say, I already had some masses said. We got to get him out of purgatory. This family member received it. And I sometimes feel like reading this book is reminding me of what real importance it is. Some of you may feel powerless, like you can do nothing in this earth. Maybe you're bedridden, maybe you're quadriplegic, maybe you're the most poor person there is. But you can pray for those souls in purgatory. They can guide you, they can protect you. And when you die, they too can help you get out of purgatory. Help them get out of there. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for watching this informational Bacon Bit. And as always, remember to live your life sunny side up.